Ma ua te whawheloa ai mawhatalo whātu lau mai mo mai le nei tu lau le aso. O le prokalama le nei o le KokoBytes e lalo le wa'ainga o matangan wenga o whatawa inga. E tala noi nai mata upu wha teknolosi. Manisi fo'i ua i longa la lato tautua i le nei matata. Ai maise fo'i, o ni avanoa po ni prokalama e ono mea mo Amerika Samoa. O au nei o Ginger Porter, whapea ma le sunga ya Michael McDonald. Ma ua te whaatautai ala tātou prokalama. Welcome to KokoBytes, where we keep your cup of Coco Samoa full with innovations and creativity in American Samoa's tech community. I am Ginger Leigh Porter, your host, together with my co-host, Mr. Michael McDonald from the American Samoa Department of Commerce. Talofa lava, Michael.
Talofa, Ginger, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Hey, well, today I brought my cup of Coco Samoa full of innovations.
Uh-huh.
So it's been a while, so I figured, you know what, let me bring my Coco with me, Coco Samoa, right?
That's excellent. As you know, I am out of props today, so you right on. You took it right over. So
I've got your back. I've got your back.
Yes, exactly. Well, our conversations lately, right, in our working group, we, just a short catch up for our audience. We continue to have our weekly working group discussions with various members of the community, various representation from public, private sector. We even have Red Cross in the conversations and various members of the community on how we can be innovative, right? How we can be creative in the use of technology or use of broadband. And we are also hosting, or we're conducting a household survey. So some of you, our audience today, might have seen our survey or even seen the young people who are out there conducting the survey. But it's all part of creating these strategies, right, on how we can utilize and maximize internet in American Samoa, or broadband in general. So our conversations have revolved around many things and many different perspectives.
Right.
And we've also been talking about, key components in government services, in digital economy. And, we touch on, well, today we're going to talk about business process outsourcing. So I wanted to, start with that with you. Like, can you share a little bit about what that entails, what public-private partnerships are, some of the exciting things that are happening in that arena in American Samoa?
Right. Well, yeah, there are a few projects going on right now in the BPO industry. Of course, if you're unfamiliar with the term BPO, as Ginger pointed out, it's business process outsourcing, also known as call centers, also known as contact centers, and I guess most frequently, recently, they're being referred to as knowledge process outsourcing. So anything related to the internet information transfer is being referred to as KPO. But the Department of Commerce currently has a BPO business incubator up and running in the village of Whangatongo. And we have entered into a partnership with Azteca to make that project a reality. And of course, we have a private sector partner, Cloud Solutions, who is the third, group in this partnership, who is being incubated presently. And as a matter of fact, Ginger, they are in the process of training a new crop of call center agents as we speak. And so despite some of the challenges we've seen over the past 12 months with COVID-19 and restrictions around working hours, they are hiring again. And the goal is to try to get to 200 over the next 6 to 12 months out of that one incubator project. So that's pretty exciting. I know if you have been following call centers in general here in American Samoa, this conversation goes back to 2009, when the ash cable was brought online, and not much has really happened. I know a few weeks back, Ginger, we spoke with Robin and Vico Nomaya, who are part of the cloud solutions partnership as well, and so that conversation has had a long history here, but things are finally becoming a reality with the improvements we've seen by way of Hawaii. And yeah, our conversation today is going to continue along that track. And the folks that we're going to be speaking to today are not newcomers to the call center scene here in American Samoa. So I'm looking forward to speaking to our guests here in the next couple of minutes.
Great. So, with that, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our guests so we can bring them in.
All right.
So today we have Brajesh Ugrah, and Brajesh is the head of sales, business development, and client management globally for the information technology, business process outsourcing, and engineering service at Datamatics. And then our second guest is Mr. Barney Sene, a son of Samoa, a graduate of Samoana High School.
Go Sharks.
Yeah. So, and he is currently the managing director and chief technology officer for Aviana Technologies. He's also been in corporate management positions in giants of logistics and distribution companies, in health insurance, shipping companies, DHL, Worldwide Express, and many others. So the two of them together, they have extensive experience in building global businesses in technology, e-commerce, enterprise architect, and applications, and in various scales and multi-geography, multi-million-dollar operations across industries vertically. So
smart guys.
Yeah.
A lot of experience there.
A lot of experience, and we are fortunate to have them join us today. So I'll go ahead and bring them in.
All right, let's get them in.
Here we go. Talofa, Barney, and Brajesh. Welcome to KokoBytes.
Hi, Ginger.
Talofa, guys. Talofa. Welcome.
Good to see you.
Yeah, so I'm just really curious with time zones. I have 4 different time zones, hoping that are on this screen right now. So can I just say, okay, I'll start with Brajesh, and can you say where you are and what time is it there?
Well, right now I'm in New Jersey, which is where I live in my home. It's 10 minutes past 7 p.m. Wednesday evening.
Great, thanks. And Barney?
Yeah, I'm in the Los Angeles area, and it's after 4 p.m. here.
Of course, I'm in Hawaii, and it's about 2 p.m. here.
Right, and I'm in the great village of Utule in American Samoa, and it's 10 after 1 here. So yeah, all over the place.
Oh, that's fantastic. And this is really, another big way to demonstrate the power of this technology or internet, right? This connection between people and different time zones, and we're able to do something like this. So thank you. Yeah, so this is exciting stuff overall. So Barney and Brajesh, as we've discussed, right, in previous conversations, both of you have worked together, and I've also just shared with the group that the between the two of you, tremendous experience in various aspects of technology, e-commerce, business aspects, and operations. And so, can you give us a brief background on your working relationship and why it's been so successful?
Yeah, Brajesh, maybe I should start off here.
Sure.
And just start how the relationship started. When I was at General Electric, General Electric was right at the very tail end of the .com before it went bust, right? So this was in 2000 and so forth. And I was recruited out of DHL to go to General Electric to sort of do the magic that we did at DHL with regards to moving and building products on the internet. And there's a cost to that. It's the high cost of people who do this, right? In the very beginnings, when technology was bleeding, we were at the bleeding edges where you had companies like, you don't hear them anymore, like Netscape and Sun Microsystems. Those were the guys we worked very closely with in our offices, working to make this thing work, on the internet as an example, even on a browser as an example. So so we were brought over. I basically moved from DHL to GE with about 50 people. We just basically moved them, right? Raided DHL and moved them over to GE. And so because of moving these people over, they were very expensive, right? At the very tip of these, you had very high paying people. And General Electric, it's a company that really looks at the money at the end of the day, the bottom line. And after about a year of being at General Electric, we were instructed, you need to cut your costs down. You need to basically figure out a place to outsource and have people build your product, the products that we're having your team build. And my argument had always been, out of one person that I have in my team could basically do the work of 5. That was my convincing argument to me, but that didn't fly with the executives at General Electric. So what happened was, I was basically said, there's this company out in India that's new to General Electric. They're looking for business. They haven't gotten an engagement yet. You need to go talk to them. And so they handed Brajesh's name to me. We started talking, then Brajesh basically met me up in San Francisco. I remember very well, one front street in downtown San Francisco on the 22nd floor, which where our offices were at. And my first inclination to Brajesh was, you have to prove to me that what you have will work for us, right? And so that was basically the whole deal. So show me at least 5 good people that will pass the litmus test. So Brajesh was able to provide 5 people to us. We interviewed those folks and said, wow, they look like they're fairly good. So now show me what you have in India. And basically we interviewed over 200 candidates out of India and down selected it to 200. So that was the process. And so the next step in terms of proving whether this was a viable sort of direction for us, I then needed to go to India and actually look at the facilities. And this is the tour that I then went with Brajesh. And obviously some of the executives in my team did not believe in India as an example in terms of an outsourcing direction. So I went with Brajesh to India. He gave me the tour of their facilities. We looked at it. There were certain things that I asked Brajesh we needed to upgrade or change, right? In terms of certain standards or things that General Electric wanted as well. Brajesh came back and basically said, yes, we could do those things and so forth. And on my return back to the US, my message to the team was, it looks like this is a viable thing we need to do. We're ready to go to India. I brought on a project manager. He was not convinced at all. Brajesh and I know the project manager very well. He was kicking his feet. He did not want to do any project at India, let alone go to India as an example. But that's what it took to build that relationship. It was really, Brajesh had to prove that his team, his organization, which I believe it was like 120 people.
Yep.
That's what the organization was. And within 3 or 4 years, Brajesh and that organization built up to over 3,000, I think it was 3,500 people in that organization within 3 to 4 years from an outsourcing perspective, right? So there was a lot of work there in terms of building this relationship, but this was like 20 years ago. When you look at it from today now, and I'm kind of looking and say, my golly, I feel very old. 20 years is a lifetime. So that's how I met Brajesh, and it was a relationship of, you guys need to do something together. It wasn't like I was seeking Brajesh. Brajesh was just seeking business, and his organization needed to prove that it will work for us. And then just going from there, as I moved to other companies as a CTO to take on other positions, Brajesh would contact me. We looked at opportunities within those organizations, whether I outsourced my QA team or an engineering team or whatever. Brajesh was always there to basically say, we can do it, or Barney, here's an option around it. So that relationship went on for a couple of years and so forth as I went through these different corporations that I was a CTO at. And I'll turn it over to Brajesh because he has probably some more to say about the relationship.
Yeah, well, the relationship started exactly like Barney mentioned. It was sort of how we were new vendors to GE, and we were looking for work. And Barney's unit, G Energy, needed a lot of work to be done at very reasonable cost. So while Barney did touch upon the price factor, which I'm sure was his biggest concern, but the other factor that I think was also important is that the skills were very scarce. Certain kinds of skills that were required by GE, so there were fewer here, and there were more in in other parts of the world. And typically, India has a lot of technology skills. Also, there was an inflection time where the visa rules were getting changed, so not a lot of people could travel here. Everybody wants people to be here under their, under the supervision, and that's natural. So when the gentleman that Barney's referring to was kind of digging his heels and not very convinced, we said, guys, listen, there's only so much that we can do here. The projects will get delayed, everything will get delayed. So we need to compress it. So we need to do two things. We need to have a turnaround time, which is quicker. We need to have volumes of people, and we also need to have quality at a reasonable cost. So while there were some people still in San Francisco, our front end team was still there. 4 or 5 people were always in Barney's team. But the larger chunk of 100+ people had to be somewhere else because it wasn't just possible. Even the 22nd floor, I don't think Barney could have had 100 people just sit there. It's an expensive proposition. It's not just about cost of resources, it's the cost of infrastructure and everything else. So that's how the relationship came about. And I've been doing this for almost 35 years, so at the time when outsourcing was zero or not even known. And it's been a very excruciating but a very rewarding journey. And Barney certainly, listen, it takes two people to want to make it happen when it really, to make it a success, to make it happen and to make it a success. Barney was right there. I'm very lucky that he was there and we could kind of make this a success. And we repeated that success later in Juniper when Barney was there, in Wellpoint when Barney was there, and a couple of other Sage, you were there briefly, right, Barney? So yeah, we kind of work together in several organizations together. Has been fun.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear the backstory, Brajesh, between your relationship. Of course, it was your relationship with Barney that connected you to American Samoa. In fact, it was about 3 years, 4 years ago, Barney, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Where
I sort of
you,
went back and it was actually 2015, believe it or not.
right,
That's
5 years.
5 years ago.
Wow,
I
time
can't
flies.
imagine. We talked about this yesterday. It was 5 years ago. I can't imagine it.
Well, for our audience, of course, you guys traveled here 5 years ago. And when I say you guys, Datamatics, in particular, your company, Brajesh, accompanied by Barney, to take a look at possibly opening up a call center here in American Samoa. And of course, timing wasn't right. The opportunity wasn't there. And here we are 5 years later. The landscape has totally changed. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on whether or not it's too late for American Samoa to capitalize on opportunities in the BPO industry.
Yeah, and American Samoa, as Brajesh and I, sometimes we meet different places. Either we somehow surprisingly are in Sydney, Australia, not knowing after we reached out, we found out we're just like around the block where we come across each other in Brussels, right? Passing through the airport, we're looking at each other and saying, I know you, right? Strange places to be to meet people, right? People just out of the blue.
Small world.
Scheduling. It's a small world. But in terms of Datamatics, we started, Brajesh and I, when we always sit back and kind of either had dinner or do something of that sort when we get together, we always talk about, hey, maybe Brajesh, American Samoa, is there a chance of outsourcing there as an example, right? And probably Brajesh heard it so many times and so forth that the Datamatics part, it was out of coincidence, I believe, Brajesh, that you guys were looking at another place to source at, right? There was the opportunity at that moment of time.
Yep.
So Brajesh reached out to me and said, Barney, that thought that you said about outsourcing in Samoa, I want to see if that will work, right? So in 2015, it was around April, May, we started that discussion. And then the team came down there, Brajesh, and two other folks came down there as well to basically test the waters there. Um, without even publication, it was almost like a word of mouth that went out. There's this company out there. They're looking for people. They want to test the waters to probably interview people to see whether they would match, or it was more of a discovery than anything else. And if I recall correctly, it was over 100 or so people, because there was a whole bunch of applications that came in out of the blue. We were surprised.
I think there were over close to 200 people. We had thought that we will get about 75, 80. We had planned for a 4-hour session, thinking, you know what, we've really not advertised. We'll get some people by word of mouth. We ran out of space. We ran out of time. We literally did it from morning to night. And we were very excited. So sorry, Barney, to cut you off.
No.
It just blew our minds, that the kind of reaction and the response we got, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, and for us, and I think what came out of that whole session, and I'll let Brajesh talk about it because he was there on site for about a week, and so forth. But in terms of what we saw as issues there, right? The outcome of this, as we went further into the discussion, was think about it. 2015, Hawiki wasn't there, right? So the cost of internet broadband and just data alone was really high. So we were working to negotiate that either through Blue Sky, through the Ash cable, or some other means, however we could, to bring that cost down. Let alone, we even got to the point where we're saying, can you commit that this cost will come down in 3 years, right? Those were some of the discussions that went, even though they were high, right?
Right.
So broadband was the big issue. The next issue was utility cost. It's high in Samoa versus like in other parts in the United States. So that was the other part of discussion. The third part was office space availability. And I'm not just talking about office space. It was literally office spaces that, when you do outsourcing for a client or a customer, there are certain liabilities that go with it. In other words, you don't want to have an office space that a customer or a client in the United States could, some sort of photo that comes back that reflects it as a sweatshop, as an example, right? Those are things that in a company that is public, if it hits the Wall Street Journal as an example, it could tank your stock, right? As an example. So companies are very sensitive in terms of where they outsource to and who they outsource to, right?
Right.
So those appearances are important. The fourth part was the approval process from a government perspective. Even though I think there was a lot of interest, I think from an ASG, a government perspective, I think there was a little bit of a shock, like where did this come out of, right? Out of the blue. But then there was a lot of negotiation going in terms of how do we make this happen from tax reductions, right? Because all of this stuff, you need to really put a good business case around it. Immigration, as an example, right? Because from a Datamatics perspective, to train the workers, we'd have to bring people from India into American Samoa. So you had to have that flexibility from an immigration perspective. But all in all, what happened was that whole process took roughly about 4 or 6 months to really finalize it into something that was concrete. But by that time, we missed the opportunities, right? Because the opportunity just came and left. And if you're not ready, you just lose it. And I'll just turn it to Brajesh to give his insights in terms of what he found there, in terms of the people as an example, the type as an example, and pretty much the landscape.
So to answer your question, no, it's not too late. It's certainly not late, and I'll tell you why in a bit, in a minute. So my interest in American Samoa was because I feel genuinely that we in the United States have not tapped all the opportunities and all the potential that we have to tap, that we can tap. And there's a good reason for that, because outsourcing started typically earlier with IT because of the lack of resources, lack of very expensive resources. BPO was still a very sticky business. People had kept it in-house because the cost of the human capital was not too much, and it was very steady business. Now with automation coming in and all that coming in, the whole dynamics has changed. Robotic processes have come in, OCRs instead of just scanning and photocopying and things like that. So if you look at, you see a product like DocuSign, you look at a product of, different kind of filing systems. They're all electronic, where you need a different culture. So it has a bend of technology. Also, it has a bend of communication, which a lot of people missed out earlier. So to answer your question, the opportunity hasn't gone away. If at all, it's actually been reinforced. And I'll come to that in a minute. When we came, for example, 5 years ago, is because two of our customers had spikes, and they were looking at, it's an aging population. A lot of people are going on, Medicare, Medicaid. All that has to be done on the U.S. soil. All that has to be done here. Mortgage processing, there was the whole meltdown, the financial industry meltdown, data leakages have happened. So a lot of companies are getting more nationalistic in some of those approaches, saying it has to be on US soil. And it is not good enough just to be, so earlier it used to be just US soil, and then finally it became, there has to be by US nationals or US or residents. And you can't even have, let's say, an immigrant or maybe an H-1B person work on it. So all this is an evolving business situation that is happening. With that, I feel that there is a lot more opportunity now than there was earlier. Also, what is happening is there's a lot more opportunity because the costs are going up here. The aging population is taking a lot of people out of the workforce. The younger set have a lot more other opportunities, different stuff to do, and the minimum wage is rising. So the companies are still struggling with the gap of between the workers and their knowledge and their willingness to work at a certain price point. So we have to find, there used to be what is called rural sourcing. So you go to the middle of Utah, you go to the middle of, some Midwestern city or Alaska, but that's just not working out because mainland United States is still, there are two things. Number one, it's expensive relatively because of because it is in the mainland, number one. Number two, especially in BPO, you need sticky business. There's a lot of training that's involved. So when you train people how to do it, if you talk to American Express, you know how well their agents answer the questions because they've done that day in and day out. They know exactly the process. You cannot have a route. I can't be an agent of American Express today and American Airlines tomorrow because I wouldn't know what to do. So the companies invest in me. And in any large business hub, there's a lot of floating population. A kid across the street, there'll be a McDonald's that opens across the street. The kid will join that for just because it's more fun, just because it's more hip, just because it pays 50 cents more. So we also have an attrition problem in the US. So there's a lot of investment that goes on in training, development. Barney was mentioning we'll have to get the trainers, and they don't necessarily have to be in India. In this case, it had to be from India, because we were looking at two large companies that did healthcare companies, and a lot of expertise in our company rested offshore. Otherwise, we can also get people from the United States, provided that skill is required. So yeah, one thing that we have not tapped is, so this BPO actually has 2 or 3 areas to it. One is the BPO, which is basically invoice processing or healthcare processing, ideal spot for US-based processing like mortgages, like healthcare, confidential information, financial services, has to be done on American soil. That's one. The other thing is the voice-based stuff. When you call up an American Express or you call up Dell, you need help. You can't just navigate this through the internet or email or chat. Doesn't help. When I get stuck with my system, I need that help, a voice at the other end. Maybe somebody would take control of my computer and walk me through. All that needs to get done here. That cultural savviness and affinity is also very, very necessary, which American Samoa offers. And of course, the price points are phenomenal. So, I think overall, this package makes American Samoa a great location for especially the BPO offerings. I would not say IT right now, but BPO certainly.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. The call centers have been around a long time, and there's a lot of talk about automation and AI, and that might phase out, the need for call centers. But it sounds like there's still tremendous opportunity for American Samoa in that industry. And so thanks for sharing that insight. I did have one other question for you. Barney had shared you were here for a week in 2015. Did you at least leave here with a Matai title? Or is that on your next trip, right, Barney?
I wasn't brave enough to get a tattoo. Right, in traditional way.
Yeah. Well, what about Brajesh? I think next time when Brajesh comes back, if he comes back, then we'll.
Yeah,
we'll
no,
get him
I
straight.
will most, I would be delighted to come back. My wife actually wants to come along with me, and so I actually, I may just come back even for a personal visit. We as a company, we invested at least 8 executive weeks because we made 2 trips to American Samoa. uh, 4 people in each group. I came only once because I came on the first trip, and then I had my other colleagues that came in. So that was 2 trips, and then we spent a bunch of time, just what Barney mentioned, in just kind of negotiating, going back and forth of how to make it happen.
Right.
Because and we knew that the facilities or the site is not yet ready, but we didn't quite anticipate so much time to be taken. See, when a customer comes to us with a problem, we need to go back with the solution almost right away. Otherwise, they go somewhere else.
Right.
And so we lost those windows of opportunities. But there'll be more. There'll be more.
Right. Well, I'll just add one more thing, Ginger. I know Ginger has another question, but just an update. I know you had a pretty good turnout, 250 or so people. That goes to show the interest that people have here for this sort of work. But that interest has not subsided. If anything, it's grown. We have 2 training programs going on right now to skill up people with the necessary tools and skills to work in a call center or internet, a remote learning environment. Right now, we launched, when I say we, the Department of Commerce, we launched a internet work academy a couple of weeks ago in partnership with a local company here, Higher Growth, or Pacific Link rather, and the other call center incubator program that I mentioned earlier. They're going through a training right now to get people ready to fill seats for a contract that they've secured. And so there's a lot going on to get our workforce ready. A lot of work still remains, but I just wanted to share that update with you too.
That's good.
Yeah, and I want to just pick up on all the developments and the changes and advancements that we've been, you've shared since your time in American Samoa. So from landscape change to infrastructure changes and upgrades, the telecommunications, and lots of different things that are happening there that is creating this environment that could potentially nurture, right, startups for call centers. And that movement in technological advancements have made this process for call centers so much more affordable, and legacy systems are being phased out in favor of cloud-based contact center models. So how does this play out, your opinion, and how does this play to our advantage in American Samoa?
I kind of look at the technology part, right? So sometimes, especially when I go through a lot of the businesses to basically automate or re-engineer or create efficiencies through them, sometimes people look at technology as the end goal, right? The solution for all things, but it is not, right? If you really look from a business perspective, there is a process from start to end. There are activities that happen within that process, and this is where you bring in the technology or the automation, if you will, to streamline that, right? Either through people, through machinery, through AI or software, however you call it, right? But technology is just an enabler, right? Which we need to be careful how we use this, because I've seen so many projects failed within a business where they deployed the technology, but they didn't re-engineer the business, right? From a process perspective and so forth. And it just failed royally, right? Because they were trying to reverse engineer the technology and then make that their process, right? Which is the wrong approach of doing it. So most of these companies look at this as a technology just an enabler. It's not the total solution, right? It's really the services at the end of the day, right, that you're trying to enable and so forth, and create efficiencies within a company. Because, you know, it's always about, here's your cost, whether it's $1 million a year. And I go through this, right? Where when I first started in a corporation, they'll say, okay, here's your budget. It's $100 million, but next year we're going to cut it down to $80 million. And we're going to continue to cut it, Barney. So you need to figure out how to, you know, streamline your organization, get efficiencies. Outsourcing is one of them, right? So that's how, you know, all of this it works and so forth. But when I look at the contact center part, right, it does require human contact, whether you like it or not, right? You know, because at the end of the day, I get frustrated when I go through an IVR system, right? Where you're going through a tree that says, you know, if you're looking for finance, press 1. For technical support, press 2. Okay, you press 2, you go to technical support, and they keep asking you more and more questions. By the 5th sort of landing that you land there, you get so frustrated. I hit the 0 button to basically get a person. Unfortunately, some systems are so smart, they don't allow you to press to get to a person, which is even worse. So I hang up and I say, forget it, I'm done, right? I'll come with that later. So there's that human contact that people are still looking for. You can't avoid that from within a contact center. And, you know, the robotics, the machineries will help get the answers. In other words, the person you connect to, if the systems in the back end are smart, I'll be able to get you the answer very quickly, right? Versus saying, I'll get back to you. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of when we talk about the technology and the contact centers and so forth, because all of these cloud-based systems and so forth, they are automated, right? In a sense of answering stuff. But when you think about it, if they are automated, why would I even put anything like this in American Samoa, right? I could put it hosted at a data center, you know,
right.
Amazon. So I think really what we're talking about here at the end of the day, you know, when we look at this, because we're kind of looking to say, we have all this infrastructure, what do we do to make money out of it? And literally, I think when we say making money, I think it's more about how many jobs can we create?
Right. Job
creation. How do we increase the GDP? Right? These are questions we need to go talk about. How do we change the economy so it's not tuna packing, as an example? It's more of a, you know, intelligence type of economy, right?
Right.
So I think those are the things that we will need to look at, right, when we start talking about how to leverage these technologies and so forth.
Well, you know, I quick question here. Speaking of Amazon and data centers, you know, the discussion around data centers is really the volume, if you will, the chatter has continued to increase over the past year, especially after Hawaii was lit up. What are your guys' opinion on what's best for American Samoa, data centers or call centers?
Well,
your thoughts?
Yeah, I can tell you, and maybe we're not using the term correctly. We're using data centers as sort of the catch-all of all things, or maybe, and I don't know. When I hear people talk about, and I've started to see this in people's platforms where they say we need to get to data centers. Be mindful that data centers is a technical term, right? What does it mean? It means a large building that stores all of these computers running to process data, to run applications and so forth. So I'll kind of give you an example. So I went into a company called Ingram Micro as their CTO. And my first 90 days was determine what's wrong with the organization. And there was quite a lot. They were running a mainframe. They were running an older, what I refer to as backend systems that they wrote themselves. They basically built themselves. They were very proud of it and so forth. But it was taking a lot of time and they just couldn't adjust to the market. So I actually had to go in and propose, starting from basically saying I need $250,000 to get Deloitte in to do an assessment, which was hard to get from finance. To the next level, saying now we really need to drill down even further. I need $5 million, right? And the CFO basically pushed back and said, I'm not giving you more than 5 million, and that's it, Barney. Whatever you're thinking of, we're not doing, right? As an example. This project, within about 6 months of driving this through to replace their ERP system, came out to about $480 million, right? And so that's how I sized it up and got the consultants in and everything to replace it. Now, out of the $480 million, over 100 million was for data center. right? So this was basically to build the servers up. Just the servers and the network cost $100 million. And bear in mind, this was in 2005 when these discussions happened. Okay, so the value of money has gone up, if you will. So, and now you also have to be mindful that these servers need to be replaced every 3 years. So if you depreciate it over 3 years, then you actually have to kick it back up and start all over again. This is an endless thing you're spending. So roughly at $100 million, you're roughly spending about $32 million a year forever, right? If you're talking about replacements all over again, right? So it's a costly proposition. So what has happened nowadays in the market, and because this was a project I was out in Sydney for a year to basically move Commonwealth Bank of Australia to the cloud, to the Amazon cloud, right? And so the whole idea there was, we're tired of having our own data centers. We're gonna just move it to get hosted somewhere on some sort of data center platform that we don't have to be paying for this, that we can lease space. So a lot of these companies now are basically moved away from having our own data centers, right, as an example. And they're basically moved to a cloud data center that's hosted primarily by Amazon or by Microsoft and by Oracle. There's key vendors that really are into this business, right? And when you talk about their data centers, these are huge, right? Yeah, and so what are the requirements of a data center? You need to be close to where your customer base is, right? So if you look at American Samoa, there's not a lot of
We're not close to anything.
So that's the first elimination part. It doesn't check the box, right? Because we're too far. Data centers need to be close to a customer location, big customer base, because of you want to minimize the latency, right, as much as possible. That's number one. Number two is, if you kind of look at it, we're kind of smacked in the middle of the equator. Humidity is high, very bad for equipment, right? So data centers require a lot of cooling, which means a lot of electricity, a lot of power. Ideal place to put this out, Alaska or the South Pole. But again, you don't see data centers there, right? Perfect cooling site. Why? Because they're too far away from customer base, right? So you see these data centers primarily around big metropolitan areas and places where population is at, and primarily on where the main internet pipe is at. Right? So you see them in San Francisco. Colorado is a big site. Over in the East Coast, as an example, where the main internet pipe basically goes right through, crosses through. The other component of this requirement for a data center, if we're talking about large data center, is the redundancy of your pipe. So you can't just be the Hawaii pipe. You need two others, like you need like triple redundancy. So you're gonna need more different vendors in case one fails. So you need that redundancy. So if I add all of these things up, it really kind of puts data centers off the mark for Americans more to focus on. If you're talking about a computer, whatever to his room, right? Or a small location that has some computers, that's great. But bear in mind that most of the applications that are being built today, they're all on the cloud. People are not basically building data centers to put their applications. It's just too costly. I could go rent space.
And if I may
to run my apps.
Yeah, no, it just to interject, you know, I think data centers also in terms of employment and number of people, you know, to run a data center, you know, they
not a lot.
Yeah, not a lot. And by comparison, contact centers or call centers do just the opposite. You know, you need human capital and
I would put it in two ways to combine the question and to just re-articulate what Barney said in a little different manner. Is like cloud and data center, the two things that got touched. The cloud is going to be a vehicle. It doesn't matter if we have to do something off the cloud, it still does not take out the people. The job that needs to be done has to be done by people or by either themselves or people supervising. So even in a robotic situation, and you have 6 machines working and they're doing their own stuff, matching invoices and cutting out checks, but there are exceptions for which somebody has to go in there and make a correction. There is human intervention, there is human supervision. It's another matter that instead of having 6 people doing it, you may have 6 machines doing it, but those 6 machines still has to have a supervisor to make sure the machines are behaving, right? So there is that employment. So that, and now, So it doesn't matter whether it's being done through cloud or it's being done on the server or it's being done in a mainframe. That doesn't matter. The last mile employment that a company that people like us offer will still deploy people, which is where American Samoa comes in very handy. The
Right.
other thing is data center. Barney has explained this in great detail, but technology and hardware infrastructure is not American Samoa's strongest suite.
Right.
What we do is we typically do what we call white space. What does American Samoa have? What does the market need?
Right.
And can that be mashed together?
Right.
What you are looking for is your youth that needs to be gainfully employed, a socio-economic impact, social impact, economic impact, reversal of the population, reversal of brain drain, higher employability, and an impact to the GDP that Barney mentioned, because there is a cascade effect. So if you start an office of 500 people, you will need a cafeteria. There will be people who will have the affordability to buy cars. They will go to a movie. They will buy new clothes. The whole ecosystem in American Samoa gets an uplift because of that. So what we're talking about is two separate things. So let's not look at, first of all, I don't think we should look at, like Barney mentioned, data center is not which American Samoa is looking at. Cloud is just a manner in which something may or may not get done. What we are looking for is which of the pockets of BPO, and BPO here I'm combining BPO and KPO, which is not knowledge processing. And within BPO, there are two segments. There is data BPO, which is basically like invoice processing. And there is call BPO, basically call center. My thing is that I think whatever study I have done on American Samoa, my involvement for the last 5-6 years, my knowledge of the area based on my discussions with Barney over the last 20 years, is you got very smart young people, you got a captive population that can be there is a sliver of opportunity. The two models that I think of off the top of my head are the Philippines model and the Singapore model. Two totally different situations. Philippines started call centers because they had a huge American base. They had a big Spanish/American influence. The accent, the names, everything else, they capitalized on it. Today, people are running those centers for years. I mean, because it's sticky business. They've trained those people. Those people love the job. They just do it. Except that it's 12 hours, 13 hours away. So it's very difficult for, their night shifts and their 24-hour shifts and all.
Right.
The other thing that I look at, a model that I would look at, is the Singapore model, where Singapore was a rock in 1962 when they got independence. Literally a rock with 4 fishing villages. And they transformed it. They looked at what they had. They had a seaport. They had a small rock. They imported population because they had none. And they built a financial hub and a trading center on top of it, like the Middle East, like Dubai and these places. American Samoa has its own advantages. You have a population of your own, which is very Americanized because they have the American high school. They work the same, they have the legal entity to work the U.S. Jobs. To my mind, the two areas where we can concentrate and we should concentrate on are database BPO and voice-based BPO.
Well, it sounds like there are certainly more conversations to be had on refining our strategy, Brajesh, when it comes to what we do going into 2021 and beyond. I think the exciting thing for me, Ginger, is that these opportunities do exist, and I think we all know, everybody on this call knows that one of our strongest assets is in fact our people. the folks who are eager and willing to work and train and fill these jobs, even the people who are living, in Hawaii or in the mainland, who may want to come back home someday, but want to make sure they can provide for their families. These kind of opportunities, I envision them eventually growing into more technical or more high-paying jobs as we mature the BPO industry here. But no, it's a great conversation to have, and I thank you guys so much for your insight. Ginger, did you have any other questions for Barney or Brajesh?
No, I actually think that you both have addressed my last two questions that I had about, priority industry that you think American Samoa should focus on. But I did want to just give you, both of you, like a minute each for any final thoughts that you want to share with us on priorities or, advice or in general comments.
Or we must do tomorrow, that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Barney?
Yeah. No, I sit back and think, right? And at the end of the day is we have all these tools within our hands, right? So the question becomes is, how do we make it happen, right? So, one of the things we need to be very careful about is that this is a long journey. It's not a 3-year bear the fruit, right? You're going to have to plant the seed, water the tree, make sure the leaves come up before the fruit bears and you can pick it. It's going to be a 6 to 8-year journey, to be really quite frank with you, in terms of building up. If we're talking about outsourcing, right? India took that long, if not, more, right? But you're talking about capital investment you need to put in here. So there needs to be really a complete commitment from government and the community. So in other words, they need to believe in it, that this is the journey, right? But you kind of like have to set a target of where you're going here, right? I mean, it's kind of like if you're going to go to the moon, you're going to figure out everything you need to do to get there. So that's sort of the approach you're going to have to do here. You're going to also have to hire and engage the right people who have done it. It can't be a training sort of venture, right? Where, I'm going to learn as I go along, because time is something we do not have, right? Our clock is ticking, and the opportunities are changing and deviating or evolving, right? So that's very important there. You need to basically be ahead, and you need to move fast, right, in terms of these things. So I think those are things we need to get to. I think if there needs to be a really firm strategy, get the right people on board to work through this. And then it needs to move fast. The commitments need to be there. There needs to be a total plan, strategy down to the tactical level in terms of how you make these things happen. And then bottom line is, at the end of the day, you need to look at what your capabilities are, right? It's almost like going to war. You have to know what you have to go to war with, and you have to know who your competitors, who your enemies are that you're going to be battling with, right? So those are the two things that you really need to know to deal with. And it can't be, I wish, it has to be what it is, right? Mm-hmm. So I know there are people are wishful thinking on this stuff. It's not easy. And I'm going to tell you right now, It's hard work, right? This is not easy. So it has to be people who are really committed to go do this. You're going to have to be a trooper, right? You're going to have a lot of failures, but the end goal will be successful, right? At the end of the day, right? It is important, to be quite frank with you. I don't see any other bigger area that would evolve, create more jobs, and change the economy. If you were to ask me, what is that? If you were to come to me and say, Barney, what is that one thing that could put us on the map and change the whole economy and the quality of life in American Samoa? I don't know of anything else but this, to be quite frank with you, right? And it needs to start at the BPO call center part, and then eventually graduate upwards, because as you train, as you do, you learn, and you move up that ladder where it becomes more technical and so forth. So that's the evolution that I'm talking about, that you evolve up to that level.
Right. Well, thanks for that. And we certainly appreciate the comment about having a plan and strategy in place. Barney, you've been part of the broadband strategy work group for the past several weeks, and your contributions there are added, and we agree 100% with that. That's why we've embarked on this journey to create and document a strategic plan. Brajesh, final comments from you?
Yes, Barney did, while Barney did cover that and you just covered it, but Barney did start with planting the seed. I'd say, hey, you know what? You first need to dig. You first need to fertilize. You first need to find the top soil and make sure that the soil is ready for the seed to go in. And that's the planning that Barney did refer to and you did too, Mike. But the one single thing that can, when I look at it from what I've seen with my own eyes, what I know from my research, and I've known all along, and I've seen this in other places. I've seen the Manilas of this world, and I've seen the how things have transformed, not just in the BPO industry, like how Dubai today has become a trading hub, or how Singapore has become, or Hong Kong has become a financial hub. These are things where people have said, this is where I think we need to go. Nobody had these things before. This is what our strengths are. This is what the requirement is. This is how we make it happen. And like Barney said, if this is something that needs to get done, then we need to plan ahead of time. Because one thing that I learned from the American Samoa experience is I thought I could go there, create it while my customers waited. They didn't. They went away. Some things will have to be invested ahead of time. So you have to be ready with something, and then we go and evangelize this. And we really, fortunately, do not need 300 million people to employ, or we don't need to boil the ocean there. We're looking at a 60,000 people as a total population, and a segment of that which could be anywhere from 7 to 8 to 10,000 at the to start with, which if a GE walks in and or a United Technologies walk in, there you go. All you need is 2 customers if they employ 4,000 people each. And we have those kind of situations where people deploy those volumes. Now, that may not start, but what we're looking at is only 10 or 15 solid customers who will have the trust with us, which is not difficult. So I wish you well, and I wish you luck. I think it's very doable. We just need to make sure that, like Barney mentioned, solid plan, adherence to that plan, get the right people to do it. We all think we can do it. I think, well, it's very easy. What Pele or what McEnroe does is only hitting the ball with the racket till you go there and see how difficult it is to do that by yourself. So you really need to get the right people to do it for you who've done it. Because there's also would be a credibility game. So when a Barney goes to, let's say a General Electric or an ex-CFO that he's worked with, they will have the trust in Barney saying, Barney, are you sure? Will this work? How will this work? Come, take a look with me. That's the trust factor. Advertisements are not going to cut it. So you can't just put a hoarding or a billboard and expect people to walk in. That's not going to happen. There's going to be a lot of pull that we will have to do with a lot of credibility, past references, relationships, trials, and that's going to happen. Fortunately, it's something which is very, very doable.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your final comments, and we appreciate your time, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today on KokoBytes, where we keep your cup of Coco Samoa full with innovations and creativity in American Samoa's community. Soifua.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.